Hey there, this is Alyssia Essig, your host of Caught in the Middle, and I'm so glad you're here for a very important episode where I talk about why we even started or why I started this podcast. So I get asked a lot, why did you start a podcast? And well, here is Caught in the Middle's origin story, so to speak. So in 2020, which was kind of like when the world stopped for everyone, right? 2020 was a wild year. It started out where I was like, this is going to be the year that I lose some weight and I celebrate my husband's and my 20th wedding anniversary, which is a huge thing for me because, well, my parents have 7 marriages between the two of them. So I was like, woohoo, I made it to 20 years with one guy. That's pretty awesome. But you know, what happened in March when we all got shut down for COVID was the world sort of shut down. And that was wild. And in my state, one of the only things that people could actually do was buy and sell real estate. And at the same time that my husband was grounded, my kids were grounded, school was happening at home, I was out selling and I had a pretty big team at the time. I had about 10 agents on my team in 2 different states, and we were selling a lot of real estate. We sold 130 houses in 2020, which was crazy. I mean, if you look here, some of these awards are actually from those years where we just sold an obscene amount of real estate, and it was good. It was fun. I mean, I lost some weight. I lost the 25 or 30 pounds. Now, I used a diet that I shouldn't have, and some people warned me, and that'll be its own episode as well. But I don't recommend that. We'll talk about in a different weight loss episode how I really lost weight and am hopefully keeping it off. But that being said, I lost weight. I was feeling great. We were selling houses left and right. I was making decent money, but inside I was kind of starting to break down a little, but I don't know if I realized it because I was just going, right? Because then George Floyd happened in Minnesota, and some of the people that I deeply, deeply care about were just so sad and frustrated and angry and mad, and they should be. But here I was continuing to try to run a business, and I like to kind of describe it that I was the captain of the boat, and I was rowing the boat, and I was rowing and I was rowing and I was rowing. And the people in the boat weren't rowing because they were either scared of, leaving the house because they're immunocompromised and they didn't want to get sick, because we were all being told that, oh my God, if you get COVID, you could die. And that was freaking a lot of people out. And then you had a lot of people that were, again, frustrated with the society of our world at the time, which, again, valid facts. I am equally, maybe not equally because I can't understand that experience, but I was also frustrated and upset for them. But again, I was still running a business. So I was trying to keep going and trying to keep everybody afloat. And I was going, going, going. And then in 2021 was the year that my daughter graduated from high school, my older daughter. And there was something in me that realized that I was like, oh my God, my daughter is going to go off to college and everything that I've built and worked for is going to change. And that freaked me out. And so I did the first thing that I thought I should do because I was also just getting tired, right? I was tired because I felt like I was dragging people along and having them come with me, even though, that sort of boat analogy, like I was rowing the boat, but they weren't really helping because they didn't have their own capacity. And that's okay. I'm not mad at them. And that is what it is. And that's their experience. But my experience was I continued to row and I started to look at my own life and I was like, holy cow, my daughter's leaving and everything that I have worked for and built is changing. And that freaked me out. And it did more than freak me out, but it started to make me what I thought was sad or depressed, or maybe it was triggering some of my own issues and challenges. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get a therapist. And this was in the fall of 21, right around the time that my daughter went to college, when I was like, oh my God. And if any of you either have a child getting ready to graduate or go off to college, or you just recently had one, that grief, that heartache is just so real. And I'll talk about that in another episode as well. But it was just like, I was like, oh my God. And so I got myself a therapist. And, shortly after that therapist, I was like, okay, let me try some antidepressants, because I just felt myself sinking and sinking and sinking. Yet I was still trying to row that boat. And so, like, as I was sinking, I felt like that boat started to leak, and I was like bailing the water out of the boat. And I mean, I was still selling houses, and we were still busy. It was good from that perspective, but the weight started to rebound, and I didn't feel good about myself. And so, I kept going. And in the fall of 2021, my father-in-law was struggling with leukemia. My mom had she had gotten COVID, and she wound up in the hospital with congestive heart failure. And then it turned out that she needed a heart valve replacement. And so that was, a culmination of issues. And so, between all of that, still trying to sell real estate, still trying to keep everybody afloat in the boat, support my daughter who just went off to college. It was heavy. It was a lot. And I was exhausted and kind of sad. Admitting I wasn't okay kind of felt like a failure. Like, I was always the one that kept everybody going. That was me. That was my job. And keep going doing the job. Raising the white flag, or actually saying, hey, I'm not okay, was hard. But I did. And I got a therapist who I still talk to on a regular basis, and she's amazing. And I also decided, like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and maybe I need some chemical intervention. So let me go ahead and try an antidepressant. So I talked to my doctor, and I tried an antidepressant, and maybe I was less sad. I was not crying as much, but I also realized that I was at that age that maybe menopause was starting to affect me. I knew my hormones were up and down. I wasn't sleeping very well. I was, sweating at night, your classic menopausal symptoms, but I was still getting a period. So some of my older friends were like, "Oh, you're not in menopause yet. You still have a period." And they were all telling me I had to wait a year until after I stopped having a period. So again, I'm here. We're selling a lot of real estate. I'm trying, like, my whole life, I have been extremely high functioning. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism, if it's a symptom of ADD, which is also going to be another episode because I'm going to explore that. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But I've always loved having many balls in the air, and I enjoy it. I thrive on it, actually. Like, I love having multiple things, multiple, interests, whether it was, you know, ice skating and boxing and running and doing a triathlon, or, later on, doing, being the board of realtors president, and, a coach for realtors all over the United States, also selling real estate, also having my own family. Like, even in high school, I had school, I had two jobs, I had drama club. Like, I was doing all the things I always have. And usually that's good. Except I think this time, when I was in the middle of um, life, a lot of life that was happening between COVID and the social injustices that were happening. My mother, my elderly, my mother, my father-in-law, my kids going off to school. I mean, that really was the foundational forming of Caught in the Middle. And I was like, oh my God, I have to be stronger so that I can handle all of this, because this is not going away. And so, it's hard too, because, many times, and if you're listening, I wonder if you feel the same way sometimes, being like that person. That's probably why I love being in real estate. It feeds your self-worth, right? Like, when you do and provide for someone, and that makes them, happy, healthy, wealthy, whatever you want to call it, when you are a part of being the catalyst for someone else's well-being, that feeds your own self-worth. It makes you feel worthy. So to raise my hand and be like, I'm not okay. That was like, it was so hard. It was so hard to admit because I was always what I felt like the strong one, right? Like that was me. And so, I got on that antidepressant. We get into 2022. Unfortunately, we said goodbye to my father-in-law. He passed away actually exactly 2 days after my mother wound up having her heart surgery. And after my mom's heart surgery, she decided she wanted to move from her longtime home, which I think was a smart move, and moved into a really lovely condo. But saying goodbye to my own childhood home was its own interesting journey. Um, but there are 5 things that I will do when I realize I need help. And that first thing is that admitting that you need the help. And that's honestly, it's always the hardest part is saying, yeah, I'm not okay. And you can say to yourself you're not okay, but then having to voice it to someone else, whether it's reaching out to your doctor or reaching across the aisle to your best friend or your husband or your spouse or maybe your mom, your dad, your parent, your kids, whoever it is, actually admitting, hey, I'm not great. That was the hardest part because I felt like a failure. It felt like I was falling off a cliff. It felt like I was like, this is everything I know about myself to be able to do these things. And yet I'm sitting here going, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I didn't really want to get out of bed, even though I had to. And I didn't really want to do anything, but I had to. But I did slowly start pulling back from the things that I did love doing. And that was one of the biggest things for me to know was that I'm not doing the things that I enjoy. And even when I'm doing the things I do enjoy, I'm not enjoying them as much as I did anymore because it just felt like another thing I had to do. And that just really told me you got to get your shit together. And so when I got this therapist, that's what I said. I think I was around 48 years old. And I said, I'm giving myself an early 50th birthday gift. I want to really get my shit in order before I turn 50 as my own gift to myself. So I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to give this gift to myself. But what was crazy was I think that my life, everything that was happening was so happening still. And so while the therapist is and was great at the time, she really just helped me navigate all the very big challenges, whether it was my mother's move, her surgery, my father-in-law passing away, familial drama. Like there was so much going on. While she helped, she really just helped that. We didn't even have the time to get to some of the stuff that I was like, hey, I think I should work on that stuff, that deep stuff, right? Where that was the deep stuff that I wanted to try and work on healing so that I could get into my 50s and almost free myself from the chains of the expectations of who I'm supposed to be, which is that doer, the accomplisher, the achiever. And so I was like, let me work on that, which I did. But I also felt like for me, the as I realized once I went on the antidepressants, I was like, wait, maybe there's something physiological that's happening too. Maybe it's not just, that I am burnt out and sad. Maybe, I'm struggling here in addition too. So I continued on, and in the process, right, there's 5 things. The second thing after you admit that you have help is you go get the help, which I did. And, once you get that help, you have to do the work, right? Like the work is hard. Um, and when you're doing that work, that kind of leads you to the third part, which is you've got to watch what you consume, right? Like it's so important. And when I say what you consume, I am not talking about just food. I'm talking about what you watch and listen to. And, here we are in February of 2026, and that still holds true. I think that this holds true no matter what year or decade or whoever is the president. We have to watch how much we consume to protect your mental health. And limit the things that affect your mental health in a negative fashion. And I know I still will get caught up on what's happening in the world or on social media, and I will find that it will it'll pull me down. And so I have to be careful. And so consuming good things, things that are good for you, that help you, move forward, take the next best step, whether you're, deciding to listen to novels or books on tape, whether you read, whether you watch a podcast, start a podcast, whatever it is, watch what you consume. But that also means watch what you consume in your mouth and in your body, like making sure. And so I did all of these things. Like I trimmed down my social media. I trimmed down, I was started to read more books just for fun or for pleasure. I actually took a break on self-improvement books because I felt like that was actually contributing to me feeling like a failure. I know it sounds silly, but I did not have the energy or the bandwidth to do or implement any of the things that I was reading. So I was like, I need to stop like reading this stuff because it just made me feel worse. And so I got, much more into reading novels during this period, which was great. I very much enjoyed it, and it helped me kind of like escape, I guess, for a little while. I also learned, because I really learned that I actually enjoy historical fiction, which is crazy because I was a terrible student. Again, I think that's from undiagnosed ADD, another episode coming. But I loved historical fiction. And so I really leaned into this where it allowed me to learn, but it also allowed me to enjoy, right? Enjoy this thing. So I really watched what I consumed. So if you're in a space and you aren't feeling so great about your, wherever you are, be mindful of what you consume. The food, drink water, don't drink soda, don't do a lot of sugar, like eat a lot of protein, eat a lot of fiber, get decent sleep, move your body. It's so important that not only what we consume for our brain, our eyes, and our ears, but what we also consume as far as food. When you clean up your diet, you'd be incredibly amazed at to how much better you feel and how much more energy you have just from cleaning up what we put into our body. And I don't mean adding coffee or caffeine to give us the energy, because that wasn't working for me anymore either. I'm talking about stripping away all of the junk that makes us feel like shit, to be honest. And that's important to consider if you are in a space, or if I was in a space. It was really important for me to realize that what I was putting in my body was not properly fueling my body either. And so, cleaning up and watching what I consumed was a huge, huge piece. And then when I started to actually feel better, um, one of the next things I'll do is I kind of look around my space, and you realize I've accumulated quite a bit of crap. And I think that one of my favorite freeing things to do is actually to rent a dumpster and clean some spaces out and just throw it away, donate it, get rid of it. Like if you're not using it, you're not wearing it, you're not reading it, you're not, whatever it is, just get rid of it. Like it feels so good. And then like now you're on this like momentum of energy where you're starting to like feel a little bit better, and you're like, okay, now I have some of this energy. And then you clear this clutter and you like start to feel lighter and better. And that was also huge for me, was to clear all just get rid of this clutter. Because clutter weighs us down. I think my dad used to say like cluttered desk, cluttered mind, or something like that. Like I don't remember, but I think there's some sort of thing about it. I think that's why, again, in the real estate world, we tell our homeowners when they're getting ready to put their homes on the market to clear off the clutter and declutter, right? As a buzzword, declutter. Um, because home buyers need to be able to see the space, and when there is a bunch of stuff, it's hard to see it. But that's a very good representation of just life. When there's a lot of stuff, clothes, things, tchotchkes, whatever it might be, it's hard to see. it's hard to see clearly. So clearing that clutter is just really powerful. It's also just like a very empowering exercise. Like I love it. I love cleaning stuff out. Like it's kind of fun. Like, don't get me wrong. The thought of it is not fun. But then once I'm in it, you're like, okay, this is awesome. And then when you go see the cleaned space that you've just cleaned, it is like a huge relief, you know? And so the reason why I love getting a dumpster is because like you can just walk outside and throw it in there. You don't need to put it in a bag. You don't need to bag it up. I mean, we can bag stuff up too, which is great. But then you can also get rid of some bigger stuff. And so that was like just really um liberating. Really, really, really liberating. You know, so these five shifts that you make, you know, there's one final one, and that is like find your joy. So like I have realized that I love dancing, right? I love to dance. I love to sing. I love music. And that's what I enjoy to do. So it's like find your way, find your own joy. I also really love to create. I like to cook food. I have painted and drawn and taken photographs, and like I'm actually a pretty good photographer, and like whatever the things that you do, like that's what I had to lean on the things that gave me joy. Because when you find yourself spiraling like I was in 21 and 22, I also found that I was not doing the things that really gave me joy, because I either would make excuses and say that I didn't have the time, or I didn't have the energy, or I didn't have the bandwidth. But what I'm here to tell you is that you've got the control and I've got the control. So I was like, I need to go do these things. So finding my joy, sometimes maybe I didn't have time to go out dancing or sing karaoke, but what I did was I'd crank up my stereo in my car and I would sing as loud as possible. I mean, who hasn't had the freeing experience of singing at the very top of your lungs your favorite song? I mean, I sound just like Shap Chapel Roan singing Pink Pony Club. I mean, it's very liberating. Or I'm not quite as good as Whitney Houston, but I can definitely belt out I Want to Dance with Somebody. And my whole energy shifts when I do that. Think about it. If you were to get up and stand up right now, pause this podcast and put on your favorite song for 2 minutes and wiggle your butt or move your arms around, you'd feel better. I promise. Like, it's so good and fun to just let loose. You know, sometimes finding your joy is finding that person that you are 100% authentic with. Maybe it's going ahead and finding the person that you can cry with, or cry on your own and let it all out. Like, our body holds emotions. In the journey of my mental health that I have been working on, one of the things that I have realized is holding all of that energy in, all of those emotions in, particularly anything in the negative space, like sad, mad, frustrated, angry, you know, all of those emotions. When we hold them, our body holds them. And what's very interesting is, yeah, I had lost weight in 2020 and it was a decent year. And I said I used this diet thing that I'll talk about. But what I also learned is all of the emotions that I was holding on because I didn't think I was allowed to let them out, because it showed that I was either weak or a failure or you name it. So I held it in and I ballooned up and gained 30 more pounds again. And that was because I was holding on to these emotions and I didn't allow myself to let them out. And expressing joy or finding joy is one way to let out those emotions. And dance is a big way of doing that. And I think it was 2023, I went on a women's retreat. Shout out to the retreat leader, Michelle. She's amazing. And she led a dance class, but it was like a silent-ish dance class, meaning there was music playing. We were in like a gymnasium of like a church thing, right? And it was a very specific curated list. And the rules were you couldn't dance with anyone, you couldn't talk, you couldn't sing, but you could move your body however you wanted to. But you could not engage with anyone else. And there were probably about 20, 25, 30 people in the room. And so we're all doing our own thing. And I look over, and one of my retreat mates was having a bit of an emotional experience, but I was actually a negative one. She was sort of crouched down on the ground, crying, sobbing, actually. And the fixer and the doer in me that I was talking about earlier really wanted to go over there and talk to her and comfort and console her. But what I realized was I couldn't. And what was crazy was I was having the time of my life. Like, I was there dancing around this room, floating, pretending to be my best ballerina, modern dance self. And I was loving every second of it. And it reminded me who I was, and of the joy that I love to that I can give myself. There was also a hugely powerful lesson in that, was that I realized that two opposite things can be true at the same time. And that was, this person that I cared about, that I was, spending this retreat with, was having an emotional out what do you want to call it? Like, she was having an emotional release, and she was just absolutely sobbing. And I was having this incredible time remembering who I was, and that I am a pretty joyful person, and that I like that, but that someone else around me was could have a moment, and I was allowed to be joyful, and they could still be sad, and that I didn't have to stifle my joy because that person was sad. I didn't have to quiet myself to go help or console them. And it was the framework and the structure where I was not allowed to, that then I had to like work this out on my own, because I kept looking over and she was so sad. And I was like, oh my God, I wanted to fix it. I wanted to be that person, that same person I've been my whole life, where I'm doing and fixing and doing and doing and doing. Kind of like when I was in the boat rowing, and all of the people that I loved and cared about on my real estate team, and my friends who had lost jobs, etc. I was there having a great time selling real estate, losing weight in 2020. And then all of these people around me weren't. And I felt like I felt ashamed of this good year that I had. And I felt like I didn't deserve it. And I felt like I should not talk about it. And I didn't understand it until I was in this retreat dance class thing, that I was like, no, it's okay for me to be joyful and have good things and good experiences, even though people around me that I care about are in a different headspace, and that I'm allowed to have that joy, and they're allowed to not be joyful, and that they're on their own timeline. And that doesn't make me a bad person for being in a good place when someone else was in a bad place. Now, that was in 2023. It's now 2026 if you're listening to this. And, it's been ups and downs, and I'll continue to share these stories. But that dance class was so huge because it reminded me of places that I can find my joy, and that it's okay. I can still console others. I can still be helpful to others, and still have good joy and healthy thought processes in my life. And I think that life in general is, there's that yin yang symbol, because it's good and bad. And I think that life has just always got its mixed bag of really awesome things and really crappy things. And the problem happens when it's imbalanced, and we don't see both the light and the dark of our lives, and we have to balance everything. And so when the dark outweighs the light, that is when you can get burned out. And that's what happened to me. But the light, sometimes we have to find it on our own, because what happens outside, that we can't really control. But what we can control is finding our own joy. We can control what we consume. We can control asking for help. This podcast is born from something that many years ago I listened to Brene Brown's 2 TED Talks. And if anybody's heard of Brene Brown, she's incredible. She's a researcher and she studies the concept of shame. And I highly recommend, she's just absolutely incredible. But there's a quote from her that I literally live and breathe by. And the quote is, vulnerability is the birthplace of growth and creativity. And that's why this podcast was born, was because if we aren't vulnerable and start talking about the things that are tough to talk about, then we all feel alone and we feel like we have to do this by ourselves. And so even this episode, to talk about some of my own challenges and put it out there, is vulnerability. It's vulnerable. I mean, it's not the easiest of topics to talk about. Is, when you hit a wall and you think you're depressed and you're sad and you don't want to do anything. And it's not a great place to be. Nobody wants to be there. But vulnerability is the birthplace of growth and creativity. So I said, hey, I think it's time that we all have to have these conversations that people aren't talking about. And, talking about how, a lot of stuff happens in this middle life, whether we're navigating, parents dying, having surgeries, moving out of their houses, kids going off to college, weight gain, weight loss, not sleeping, issues with your spouse. Like, it's just, we are all caught in the middle. And if we're not having these conversations, then how are we going to move forward? Because talking about it is also part of that emotional release that everyone should do. I just want to say this. If you're the strong one, if you're the glue, if you are the one that everyone depends on, and if lately you have felt tired or flat or not like yourself, I want you to hear this. You're not broken. You're not weak, and you're not alone. And I used to think getting out of a funk meant getting back to who I was before, because I was chasing that for a long time. I was like chasing this. And I'm realizing in the last little bit of time that getting out of a funk is actually about becoming someone new. And I know that at 52 years old right now, that the 60-year-old version of me needs me to continue to evolve. I'm not trying to go backwards. And so the shifts, those 5 things, the shifts that I made didn't magically give me endless energy. They didn't, immediately, wipe the slate clean and I get to start over. In fact, I probably need another clutter reset now. But it's February, so I'll wait until the weather gets a little bit warmer. But, they didn't remove the stress. These shifts, what they did was they gave me this awareness that I had control, that I could control. Like, when you feel like you're out and you're burnt out, a lot of that becomes because you don't feel like you're in control. But those 5 shifts that I mentioned will bring awareness to you so that you can choose to control what you want to control. I can't control hormones. I can't control aging parents. And I can't control kids growing up and leaving the nest. And I can't control the world around me, but I can control what I can consume. And I can control who I talk to. And I can control what I say yes to. And I can control when I ask for help. And so can you. And so when being strong stops working, it might just be an invitation to grow differently, and you don't have to row that boat on your own. And so I thank you for listening. My name is Alyssia Essig, and this is Caught in the Middle.